On today's episode of the show, we discuss why Koren Johnson will be the biggest surprise for the Louisville men's basketball team this season. What exactly does that mean? We explain on today's episode of Locked On Louisville.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Happy Tuesday. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. For those who don't know who I am, this is my third season hosting the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm a credentialed media member who also does some PA announcing work for the university. Today's episode brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. As always, I want to personally thank you all for making us your first listen every day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. We conclude the four-part series that we have been doing over the past couple of days, heading into the past week or so, identifying the expectations for each individual men's basketball player. On today's episode, we discuss Koren Johnson and freshman Khani Rooths. We will conclude the show by diving into a weekly mailbag segment. There's some great questions that you all asked, but before we answer those, we're going to finish the four-part series that we've been conducting. If you have not tuned in, I want to encourage you to do so, where we have identified and discussed what the individual expectations are for each player on the Louisville men's basketball team next season. We conclude with two players on today's show. Obviously, 11 of the 13 will play next season, two medically redshirting, Ali Khalifa and Kobe Rogers. And if you're not really familiar with the series, or you need a little bit of a refresher, when you discuss the expectations, you have to identify what the role is going to be, obviously what is to be expected, and also what former Cardinal, or Cardinals in this case, does insert player here remind you of. We start with Koren Johnson, who at the beginning I stated that he would be the biggest surprise in the first year of Pat Kelsey's tenure. What does that mean? Because you could interpret that so many different ways. It's not a bad thing. Let me go ahead and preface that by saying that it's not a bad thing. But here's the thing. Koren Johnson is a star in the making. He has all of the skills to be an elite level guard in the ACC and college basketball as a whole. I think the situation that he's stepping into grants him the opportunity to be a star as early as this season. His trajectory is one that's not uncommon for us to watch a player rise into being a star. The former Pac-12 Sixth Man of the Year for Washington spent the past two seasons up in Seattle, appeared in 29 games as a freshman, averaging about 7 points a game. Pretty solid as a freshman. Then the next season starts 5 of the 31, averaging 11 points, 2.7 assists, and 1.2 steals. Efficiency numbers, not terrible. Now, free throws have to be better. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But 44% from the field, not terrible. 37% on just about 3.5 attempts per game, which is respectable. And then that glaring number, 72% from the charity stripe. That has to improve. Johnson was a spark plug off the bench for this Washington team that had some solid players on it. Keon Brooks, the former Kentucky standout, being one of them. But there were times down the stretch this season where Johnson was the Huskies' best player. You look at what he did since the Huskies began ACC play, Pac-12 play. He had 30 points in an outing against Stanford. That sparked a huge run, 16 against Cal, 17 and 7 assists in an overtime win at Arizona State. He had 17, 6, and 5 at Arizona, 21 against USC, 23 in the season or the regular season finale, and then 17, 4, and 3 against USC in the final game of the year in the Pac-12 tournament. He was arguably the go-to scorer down the stretch for a Washington team that wasn't really the greatest, but make no mistake about it, he was playing a high level of competition. Why I think that he can be a star is because, number one, you can't discount another offseason in the collegiate ranks. The natural development and progression from one year to the next, that you can't discount it, but you also can't hype it up too much. So what does Johnson bring to the court that makes me feel like he can be a star? Now, I've been very adamant about this. I think he's going to be an all ACC caliber player. My hot take is that he will land on one of those end of season lists in conference play, whether he starts or not. Let me go ahead and say that there is a chance that he could be the sixth man for this Louisville team. And if that's the case, I understand you're subbing a ton and he might not necessarily be a starter, but I would venture into saying that he's probably going to help close out games more often than not for the Cardinals this season. Averaging 11 points per game, I'm not necessarily sure what the statistical jump is going to look like in terms of production because of the balanced attack. You have multiple players that are going to be demanding shots, but I do think Koren Johnson could very well end up being a top 2 scorer. Would not surprise me in the slightest if he leads this team in scoring. Main thing for me, shot creation. Not only the ability to create his own offense, but to create for others as well. About 40% of his attempts come from around the rim, 54%. He's extremely crafty. Not the most athletic player, but quick laterally, solid first step, and he's got the ball on a string. One of the best, probably, in my opinion, probably the best ball handler on this team already. Has to be better in terms of shooting the 3 ball. He was a respectable 37% on 3.5 attempts is nothing to shake your head at. But when you look at the shot distribution, where a lot of his offense came from above the break 3-point shooting, so the spot in between the top of the key and the corner, about 30% of his overall attempts, shot distribution came from both of those areas. He was more notably better on the right side. I think shot 33% from the right, under 20% if I'm not mistaken, from the left. Great from the right side, 48% from the right corner, which took him about 10% of his total shots. So a lot of his offense is around the paint and behind the arc, but there's also instances where he definitely hunts out shots in the mid-range and can stop on a dime, can switch direction with the snap of a finger and create his own offense. Like I said, being able to dribble into his own shot while also being extremely efficient, coming off of movement, standing still. I mean, he was in the 79th percentile in catch and shoot situations, 88th percentile in spot up. The statistics point to him being able to continue this at the ACC level, another year of growth. And I think he's going to have a very fantastic year. The ball is going to be in his hands a good amount this year as well. And not to mention a 21% assist rate. So he's not just an undersized 2 guard. I mean, he is 6'2", 175 pounds. So he's sort of a tweener, but I think he more so projects to be a point guard at the next level because of that assist rate. Like, the assist numbers don't really do it justice because he is a very willing and effective passer. The pick and roll numbers wouldn't suggest that, but I don't really think that there's one aspect of his game that he lacks. And he's a solid on-ball defender, active hands, solid footwork. His game screams reminiscent of Terry Rozier. Now, Terry operated more in the mid-range as opposed to Johnson, stepping out and attacking the perimeter. But both guys knew how to get to their spots. They didn't let opposing defenses speed them up or slow down their reads, ability to get to the defense, get to the rim, and also find their open teammates, and not really being known to being a passer, but solid passer, good to great on-ball defender, serviceable at the very least, and just sort of being a spark plug on offense. Such a skilled offensive player with a deep offensive bag. So I think that stardom is right there for him. He's on the cusp of being a phenomenal ACC player. And I think that ultimately he can get to that level. That is my hot take this season, is that Johnson is going to be on an all-ACC team at the end of this season. I think that's what his role is going to be, sort of being at the very least a spark plug off the bench, a guy that can create his own offense and also set up for teammates. So it would not surprise me if when he is on the court, he's being relied upon to be maybe even a primary scoring option, secondary, tertiary at the very least. I don't think he's more of a complementary player as much as he is a true scoring option. So Koren Johnson is a fantastic player and sort of being the one that is being overlooked the most in my specific opinion. So I think that the role here could look different depending on who starts and who doesn't, but I think that it's going to be a fruitful season for Koren Johnson. Another player that I'm not really so sure what the role is going to look like, however, is freshman Khani Rooths. The talent is there, but when you factor context into the mix, one thing is for sure, that is that valuable experience is on the horizon for the Cardinals' only freshman this upcoming season. And we'll explain why context matters in this situation coming up here after we tell you about our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. It's not just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but they might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Cardinal fans, also want to take this time to tell you about our friends over at Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Continuing on along during this Monday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast, we're in the final segment of the 4-part series, which was identifying and discussing the individual expectations for every men's basketball player on the Louisville Cardinals roster. We conclude with the only freshman on the team. That is highly regarded prospect Khani Rooths. Now, let me preface this segment by continuing to emphasize the notion that Rooths is very talented, and the fact that he might not see a ton of opportunity this season is not an indication of his talent or lack thereof, as it would be pertaining to, this specific argument. However, I do think that he will see a good amount of the court. Like I said, Louisville has a system in place to where substitutions are going to be at a maximum, something that we are not used to. It's been known that Kelsey uses a ton of rotations where 8 to 10 guys will play. And it's not just a like once in a while type thing. It's pretty regularly. So I think that plays into Khani Rooths' favor. But make no mistake about it, I think that this season is all about gaining valuable experience. Rooths comes to Louisville as one of the top 10 highest rated commits in program history, according to 24/7 Sports. Rooths is rated as a 98.82, according to the 24/7 Sports composite. He's just outside of the top 30. 6th best power forward, 8th best player in the state of Florida, plays for IMG Academy down in Bradenton, Florida. Ultimately, it's all about log jam in the front court. The former Michigan signee was let out of his national letter of intent when the Wolverines made a coaching change. He officially visited Louisville and committed and signed shortly thereafter. The 6'8", 205-pound forward will be competing for minutes with Noah Waterman, Kason Pryor, Abubakar Traore, Javon Hadley, James Scott, Frank Anselm, etc. Even Terrence Edwards in certain situations. I think for Rooths, it's about gaining experience this season, making an impact when your number is called, and positioning yourself to have a breakout year in year 2. And historically speaking, that's kind of the route it seems like the Cardinals are going to take, because outside of like Francisco Garcia, freshmen, no matter how highly ranked they are, don't usually come to Louisville and produce right away. Now, every trend is meant to be broken. I'm not saying that Rooths couldn't be the exception to the trend, but historically speaking, it would be suggested that freshmen, it usually takes them at least a year to get going in this system. Rooths is really talented. There's no debating that. Here's what Pat Kelsey said. Michael McCammon put this in an article for Louisville Cardinal Authority, which is their 24/7 sports site. He said this, and I quote, this is Pat Kelsey talking. Khani is just a crazy, versatile player. Obviously, he's got great length. His wingspan is ridiculous, skilled, athletic. I think he has a chance to be a great college player down the line. I mean, as a freshman coming in with a lot of older guys, right, which I think will be great for him, you have to learn, obviously, just how to carry yourself, how to act, how to work, and things like that. But I think his upside is crazy, crazy high, end quote. Kelsey pretty much alludes to it there, that he's sort of a victim of circumstance at the moment and the victim of a logjam in the front court. I do think he's going to play. I am not so sure that he's going to average 20 minutes a night. I think he's going to be in that second rotation and being a high energy, high motor guy off the bench, because he does have, even though the upside is high and he still needs to refine that offensive skill set, I do think that he has skills that are directly translatable year one. Defensive versatility and switchability being the number one factor coming in. He's a very, very solid defender that not only can defend really well, but also defend other positions, the 2 through the 4, potential even the 1. Footwork is incredible for his size. 6'8". He is not lacking, in terms of lateral movement, solid footwork, can guard faster players and utilize that strength, and then blend it with his quickness, lateral movement, and also his underrated athleticism. He's not a very I won't go as far as saying that he's not a very athletic guy. He's not like a top-end athlete to where he's going to jump out of the gym, but he's athletic enough to really make a difference. And then being 6'8", 205 pounds, his main source of offense this season will probably be taking it to the rim and driving, living close to the rim, being a versatile rebounder and defender, being able to start the break in transition. AAU ball in 2023, where he led his team in points and rebounds, kind of highlight the the very solid potential, but also the areas in which he needs to grow. It allowed him to flourish being the number one scoring option. But the downside is that he kind of had to do too much. So the percentages might have taken a hit due to him having to be the number one option. He's not going to be the number one option for Louisville this season. It is to be determined whether he's going to be the number one option in his college career. I think he has the potential to be one. The three-point shot doesn't look terrible, even though the percentages aren't screaming that he's going to be a great shooter. He's got a mechanically solid jump shot. I think once the offensive skill set is able to improve, it's going to join a very good defensive ability, rebounding. So that's what his role is going to be this year, a high-energy guy off the bench where he is utilizing that defensive and rebounding abilities and making an impact on the court. Sort of reminds me like a combination of Deng Adele and Jalen Johnson. Not as athletic as Deng, but coming in, I feel like they were fairly similar in terms of three-point shooting. Could hit the three-point shot, not great three-point shooters coming in. And the main skill that helped them see the court early is solid defense and rebounding, and then having strength and a great frame. Jalen Johnson, sort of the same thing with rebounding and defensive tenacity. Johnson a little larger than Khani Rooths, taller. That's where you have to kind of take both skills from both players and kind of combine them into one. So he's not like either of them to a T, but you combine both of those skill sets, and I think that you get a guy like Khani Rooths. A great season for experience, valuable experience this season, with an opportunity to have a breakout year in year two. But that concludes the individual expectation series for the Louisville men's basketball team. We conclude the episode, however, with a Monday mailbag segment. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and more, and you can bet it all on FanDuel. For me, it's all about soccer. Huge soccer fan here. The Euro 2024 competition is going on. Copa America starts this week, and I will be looking forward to making some big-time money with the same game parlays. Not much luck now. That's more so me being a little bit living life on the edge, trying to incorporate some big-time odds. Just hasn't worked in my favor, but nonetheless, we stay persistent. New customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet everything from the Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add another big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel remains America's #1 sportsbook. Final segment of the show dedicated to the Monday mailbag. Some great questions to answer. First up, it seems like expectations are sky high. Do you think there will be a good portion of people that are disappointed at the end of this season due to extremely high expectations? I believe that this question is centered around the basketball team. It depends. I think that before the season, if you tell me that Louisville's going to go to the tournament, I don't think there's going to be many people disappointed. Now, if Louisville opens up the year and they play better than what most expect, and they look like a really, really good team, and they're a top 6 seed in the tournament, and they're expected to do a ton, and they lose the first game in the tournament, well, then maybe then you have a discussion. But right now, I don't think that if Louisville makes the tournament that anyone's going to be upset. But if they don't make the tournament, I do think that you're going to have a good amount of people that are going to be looking at this in a different light. Next question is a recent question. What is the difference between a shot blocker and an opportunistic shot blocker? I did a little bit more diving into my definition of this, and I'll be completely honest, full transparency. When I say an opportunistic shot blocker, I believe I'm sort of misdefining or misidentifying what I'm talking about. I really more so mean a situational shot blocker, because as it was pointed out to me in the YouTube comments, an opportunistic shot blocker sort of seems like a given. Of course, being a shot blocker, you have to have the opportunity to do so. But defining the difference between a good shot blocker and a situational shot blocker can come down to, lack of size, lack of height, and the lack of the opposition taking it in to basically contest the rim protector that is being discussed. There are three main attributes I believe that every good shot blocker has. The number one is positioning. Are you in a good position to be able to make a play? Number two, timing and anticipation. Are you just sort of jumping whenever and resorting to length blocking shots, or are you actually timing shots and anticipating them? And number three is effort. You have to not be afraid of getting dunked on or being on the wrong end of a highlight play. You have to have that urgency to be able to protect the rim at all costs. But another thing that you could also throw in there is I think you do have to have the measurables as well. You either have to have really, really solid size and strength. You have to have solid length, or a combination of those with the three things that we talked about. I think outside of James Scott, Louisville has a handful of situational shot blockers that have shown the ability to chase down opposing players, position themselves in the right spots. Kaysen Pryor being one of them, Abubakar Traore, and even Javon Hadley being another player to focus on. So I apologize for using the term opportunistic shot blocker. It more so should be situational shot blocker that we discuss. So continuing on along, going over to the football side of things, what is your thoughts on a player being committed and taking official visits elsewhere? I go back and forth on this, to be completely transparent. I don't like it one bit, but I think it depends on the caliber of player. If you're Louisville and it's sort of a lower ranked player, a guy that you feel like could be replaced in the class, then you can put the ultimatum out there that either you commit and don't visit elsewhere, or if you do commit, your scholarship's being pulled. But I don't think that works for higher rated players that are visiting like blue blood level programs. You sort of just have to deal with it. In a perfect world, I wish Louisville could just say, if you commit, you don't take visits elsewhere. If you do, your scholarship is being pulled and it is no longer valid. But that's just my opinion, just because I've seen, commitments not really mean too much right now. I mean, guys flip multiple times before signing day, and it's becoming more and more common, especially with the introduction of the one-time, or not even really one-time transfer rule, the ability to transfer at all times, regardless, and not having to sit out a season. Final question in the mailbag pertains to the football side of things as well. Do you think that Tyler Shough has the ability to be a top 3 quarterback in the ACC? Very good question. You have a couple of solid quarterbacks in the conference. Cam Ward at Miami, Cade Klubnik at Clemson. The list goes on. Ultimately, for me, Grayson McCall at NC State. I think Shough has the potential. It's going to be a matter of staying healthy. If he can stay healthy, I think that he has the personnel in place around him. He has the skill set and the quarterback coach in both of the Brahms in place to be in that conversation. So I'm going to say yes. And the schedule's not crazy tough like it definitely could have been. So I think that the opportunity is definitely there. So on tomorrow's episode of the show, we dive into the football side of things, some commitments that we need to discuss. Locked On Podcast National Football Recruiting Analyst Brian Smith joins to break down those commitments and some more recruiting developments. So be sure to stay tuned. That's going to wrap up this Monday edition in the off season. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.